Imagine it's Christmas Eve, 1945. The air is crisp, filled with anticipation and the scent of pine. For the Sodder family in Fayetteville, West Virginia, it was supposed to be a night of joy and celebration. George and Jenny Sodder had 10 children, and the older ones, excited for Christmas morning, had convinced their mother to let them stay up late to play with their new toys. Jenny agreed, reminding them to close the barn and feed the animals before they went to bed, then went to sleep with George and their youngest 2 children, Sylvia and toddler Marion. But around 1 a.m. on Christmas morning, a phone call shattered the peace. Jenny answered, but it was a wrong number, a woman asking for someone she didn't know. Shaking off the strange interruption, she noticed the lights were still on and the front door was unlocked. She assumed the older kids were still awake, lost in their games. She locked the door, turned off the lights, and went back to bed, only to be woken again, just 30 minutes later, by a strange thud on the roof, followed by a rolling sound. Then silence. Another half an hour passed, and the smell of smoke began to fill the house. Jenny woke up to find the house was on fire. Panic erupted. George, Jenny, and 4 of their children, Marion, Sylvia, John, and George Jr., managed to escape the inferno. But upstairs, where 5 of their children were sleeping, flames were already engulfing the staircase. Maurice, Martha, Louis, Jenny, and Betty were trapped. George frantically tried to get to them. He raced outside to grab the heavy ladder that he always kept propped against the side of the house, but it was gone. In the darkness and chaos, he couldn't find it anywhere. His next idea was to pull one of his 2 coal trucks up to the house and climb on top of it to reach the second-story window. But inexplicably, neither truck would start, despite having worked perfectly the day before. Desperate, the family watched helplessly as their home burned to the ground. They screamed the children's names into the roaring flames, hoping for a sign, any sign, that they were alive. But there was no response. The fire department, plagued by its own set of strange issues, didn't arrive until 8 a.m., long after the house had been reduced to a smoldering pile of ash and rubble in the basement. By then it was too late. The 5 children, Maurice, aged 14, Martha, 12, Louis, 9, Jenny, 8, and Betty, 5, were gone. The official conclusion came swiftly. The fire was ruled an accident, caused by faulty wiring, and the 5 missing children were declared dead. Death certificates were issued just 4 days later. But for George and Jenny Sodder, the story didn't add up. How could a fire intense enough to completely cremate 5 bodies leave the rest of the house's contents, like appliances and parts of the tin roof, relatively intact? They began to question everything. A typical house fire burns at around 100 degrees Fahrenheit. A crematorium, by contrast, needs to reach temperatures between 1400 and 1800 degrees for 2 to 3 hours to reduce a body to bone fragments. The Sodder home burned for only about 45 minutes before it collapsed. When the official search of the ashes began, investigators found no bones, no teeth, no human remains of any kind. This was the first major red flag for the Sodder family. An employee at a local crematorium confirmed their suspicions, telling Jenny that it would be impossible for the bones to have been completely destroyed in the fire. The family started their own investigation, and the more they dug, the stranger the story became. They discovered that their phone line had been cut, not burned. Had someone deliberately prevented them from calling for help? Then, they found their missing ladder. It had been thrown into an embankment about 75 feet away from the house. Why would it be there? It seemed someone had intentionally moved it to prevent their rescue attempt. Witnesses started coming forward with more unsettling details. A bus driver who passed through Fayetteville late on Christmas Eve said he saw people throwing balls of fire at the Sodder house. A woman who was watching the fire from the road claimed she saw one of the children peering out of a car that sped away from the scene as the house burned. Another local woman reported seeing the children the next morning. She said they were in a car with a group of people and looked to be from out of town. She tried to report it, but her claims were dismissed. The Sodders also remembered a strange encounter a few months before the fire. A traveling insurance salesman had tried to sell George a policy. When George declined, the man became angry and warned him that his house would go up in smoke and his children would be destroyed. The man attributed this to the dirty remarks you have been making about Mussolini. George, an Italian immigrant, had been openly critical of the Italian dictator, which was not a popular stance in their community at the time. Was the fire an act of revenge? Another man had also come to the house months earlier, asking for work. He went around to the back of the house, pointed to 2 fuse boxes, and told George that they needed fixing, warning they would cause a fire one day. George, who had just had the house rewired and inspected, thought this was odd. The local power company confirmed his wiring was perfectly safe. Thinking back, George realized this man was the same insurance salesman who had threatened him. Driven by the belief that their children were alive, the Sodders never gave up hope. In 1949, they brought in a pathologist from Washington, D.C. to re-excavate the site. The search turned up a few small objects, including some damaged coins and what appeared to be several small fragments of human vertebrae. However, the pathologist determined these bones had never been exposed to fire. Even more puzzling, they were from a person much older than the eldest missing child, Maurice. The report suggested the vertebrae likely came from a local cemetery and that the dirt used to fill the Sodders' basement after the fire may have been taken from there. Had someone planted them to support the official story? The Sodder family put up a billboard along Route 16 with photos of the 5 children, offering a reward for any information. Then in 1967, more than 20 years after the fire, a letter arrived in their mailbox, postmarked from Central City, Kentucky. Inside was a photograph of a young man in his late 20s. On the back, a cryptic message was handwritten, "Louis Sodder, I love brother Frankie, I lil boys, A90132 or 35. The resemblance to their son Louis, who would have been in his late 20s, was uncanny. He had the same dark curly hair, the same dark eyes, the same distinctively shaped nose. The Sodders hired a private investigator to look into the lead, but he took their money and disappeared without a trace. They added the updated photo of Louis to their billboard, but no further information ever surfaced. George Sodder passed away in 1969, never knowing what happened to his children. Jenny continued the search, wearing black for the rest of her life as a sign of mourning. She maintained the billboard and tended to a memorial garden she had planted for her lost children at the site of their former home. She passed away in 1989. The remaining Sodder children and their descendants have continued the search, but the mystery remains unsolved. So what really happened on that Christmas Eve? Were the 5 Sodder children victims of a tragic fire, their remains completely consumed by the flames in a way that defies scientific explanation? Or were they kidnapped in a carefully orchestrated plot, perhaps as retaliation for their father's political views? Why was the ladder moved? Why were the phone lines cut? And who was the man in the photograph claiming to be Louis? After more than 75 years, the fate of the Sodder children is one of America's most haunting, unsolved mysteries. What do you think happened? Do you believe they perished in the fire? Or do you think they were taken? Let me know your theories in the comments below. It's a case that continues to baffle investigators and armchair detectives alike. Thank you so much for watching. If you found this story as fascinating and heartbreaking as I did, please give this video a thumbs up and consider subscribing for more deep dives into historical mysteries. We appreciate your support. See you in the next one.